Under the flickering glow of streetlights, the cracked pavement of the neighborhood stretched out like a canvas of resilience and quiet struggle. The air hummed with the faint sounds of life, a radio's distant croon, a baby's wail, the restless bark of a dog chained in a yard. This was a place where people carried on, exchanging nods and cautious smiles, their warmth tempered by the tension that simmered just below the surface. Elijah Eli Walker moved through this world with a quiet grace, his cane tapping lightly against the sidewalk. Not out of necessity, but as a nod to the image others held of a blind man. His steps were sure, guided by instincts honed over years of navigating far more dangerous terrain than these familiar streets. Eli's world was one of echoes and intuition, his senses sharpened by a life spent in the crucible of war. To the untrained eye, he was a figure of vulnerability, a blind black man, alone standing on his porch in a neighborhood fraying at the edges. But to those who knew him, or who sensed the steel beneath his calm demeanor, Eli was anything but weak. As he made his way home that evening, the air carried a subtle shift, a stillness that prickled at the edges of his awareness. Trouble was coming, and Eli felt it before he heard it. Across the street, a group of 5 men emerged from the shadows, their laughter sharp and cruel, slicing through the night like a blade. Their leader, a stocky figure with a snake tattoo curling around his neck, spat on the ground and swaggered forward, his eyes glinting with malice. "Look at this guy," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "What's he supposed to be? Some kind of ghost?" The others joined in, their laughter harsh, their confidence born of years of unchallenged cruelty. To them, Eli was an easy mark, a man they could break without consequence. Eli slowed his pace, his grip tightening ever so slightly on his cane. He tilted his head, as if listening to something beyond their taunts. "I know exactly where I am," he said, his voice low and steady, cutting through their mockery like a blade through smoke. The leader's smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered, stepping closer. "You think you're special. Blind boy, walking around like you own this place, ain't nobody coming to save you." Eli stood his ground in front of his modest home, his posture calm but unyielding. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said, his words measured, "but if you bring it to me, you won't like what you find." The leader barked a laugh, gesturing for his men to surround Eli, their shadows swallowing the faint light spilling from the house. The tension in the air thickened, heavy with the promise of violence. The old clock inside chimed once, its sound sharp and clear, and Eli exhaled slowly, his grip on the cane shifting just enough to signal he was ready. The leader leaned in, his smirk widening as he sized Eli up. "What's the matter, blind boy?" Too scared to talk, Eli's cane tapped the ground lightly, a deliberate motion, and he tilted his head, his sightless eyes catching the dim streetlight. "I don't have anything to say to you, so," he said firmly. "You're on my property. Leave." The gang's laughter echoed off the quiet street, bouncing between the houses where curtains twitched as neighbors stole glances at the unfolding scene. The leader turned to his men, grinning. "Hear that blind boy thinks he can tell us what to do?" One of the group, a wiry man with jagged tattoos creeping up his neck, chimed in, his voice laced with scorn. "Yeah, like he owns the whole damn block, walking around like he's better than us." Eli's grip on his cane tightened, but his expression remained serene. "I didn't say that," he replied evenly. "I said you need to leave." The leader stepped closer, invading Eli's space, his breath hot with menace. "You don't tell us what to do. This ain't your block anymore. It's Axel's." Eli's brow furrowed slightly. "Axel? Who's Axel?" The leader scoffed, shaking his head as if Eli's ignorance was a personal insult. "Figures you wouldn't know. Axel's the one who runs things around here now, and he don't like people like you hanging around where you don't belong." Eli's voice remained calm, but there was a steel in it that hadn't been there before. "I've lived here for years. This is my home." The wiry man spat on the ground near Eli's feet, his laugh harsh and grating. "Not anymore. Axel's taken over, and he don't want no blind hero messing things up. Eli's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed steady. My kind. The leader leaned in close, his grin vicious. Yeah, your kind. Always thinking you're better than the rest of us. But you're not. You're just another nobody who's about to learn his place. Eli's stance shifted subtly, his voice unwavering. I don't know Axel, and I don't care what he thinks he owns. This is my home, and I'm not going anywhere. The leader's grin twisted into a sneer, his patience fraying. You don't care. You think Axel's the kind of man you just ignore. He's the reason we're here, blind boy. Sent us to make sure you get the message loud and clear. Eli's tone dropped, firm and resolute. You're done, Mark. Leave now, or you'll regret it. The gang exchanged uneasy glances, momentarily thrown by the quiet confidence in Eli's voice. But the leader puffed out his chest, his bravado returning. Regret it? What are you going to do? You can't even see us coming. One of the younger members hesitated, his eyes darting to the houses around them. Boss, maybe we should... The leader cut him off with a glare. Ain't nobody coming out here to save him. They're all scared, just like he's about to be... Eli tilted his head, his expression unreadable. They're not scared of me, and neither am I. The leader's lip curled in frustration. Big words from a man who can't see what's about to hit him. You think you're tough. You ain't met Axel yet. He'll make sure you never walk these streets again. Eli's grip on his cane shifted again, his stance steady as a rock. If Axel wants to talk, he can come himself. You're done here. The leader's laugh was sharp and humorless. You really think you're in charge, don't you, boys? I think this blind fool needs a lesson. The gang closed in, their voices still mocking but tinged with a flicker of uncertainty. The night air grew heavy, the tension coiling like a spring about to snap. You hear him thinks he can talk down to us. One of the men sneered, his tattooed arms flexing as he cracked his knuckles. Like we're just gonna let some blind black nobody tell us what to do. The wiry man stepped closer, his grin vicious. You don't belong here, Ghost Eyes. Axel told us it's time to clean house. And guess who's first on the list, you blind, black. And in the way, Eli remained still, his face a mask of calm, though his grip on the cane shifted ever so slightly. This is my home, he said, his voice low but resonant, carrying the weight of a man who had faced far worse than this. The leader leaned in closer, his sneer dripping with contempt. You're home, you're out of your damn mind. This block, this whole street, it's Axel's now. You're just a squatter taking up space where you don't belong. And we're here to make sure you get the message. Eli's head tilted slightly, his unseeing eyes fixed forward. A man who's afraid to face me himself doesn't own anything. The words struck a nerve. The leader's sneer twisted into a snarl, his anger boiling over. You think Axel's afraid of you? Nah. He's just got better things to do than waste his time on some broken-down, blind man who doesn't know when to shut up. The wiry man echoed him, his voice mocking. Better things to do, like making sure this place is clean. And you're a stain that needs wiping out. Another member stepped forward, his tone colder, more deliberate. You think you're tough, walking around like you're some kind of hero. But you're nothing, just another leftover Axel's gonna sweep away. The leader jabbed a finger into Eli's chest, his voice rising above the others. And we're here to do the sweeping. The gang circled tighter, their taunts growing louder, harsher, filling the night with a chorus of malice. But Eli's stance shifted subtly, his head tilting as if listening to something beyond their jeers. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried a weight that silenced their laughter. You've said enough. I warned you. Now you'll learn the hard way. The leader barked another laugh, though it was edged with irritation. Big words. Blind boy. Let's see you back them up. One of the men lunged first, his fist swinging toward Eli with reckless force. In a blur of motion, Eli sidestepped, his cane snapping up to deflect the blow with a sharp crack that echoed through the night. The man stumbled back, clutching his arm, his face a mask of shock and pain. The others froze for a heartbeat, caught off guard by the speed and precision of Eli's reaction. The leader snarled, his voice thick with rage. "What the hell are you waiting for? Take him down." The fight had begun, and what had started as a cowardly show of dominance was about to ignite a battle that would ripple far beyond this quiet street. Eli stood ready, his instincts honed by a lifetime of survival, prepared to protect his home and everything it stood for. The gang had underestimated him, and they were about to learn just how dangerous it was to mistake vulnerability for weakness. The night air crackled with raw tension, a storm of hostility ready to erupt. Eli stood poised in the dimly lit alley, his senses razor-sharp despite the faint blur of his vision. The first attacker, a hulking figure with more bravado than skill, charged forward, his fist arcing clumsily toward Eli's face. With the grace of a seasoned fighter, Eli sidestepped, his body moving like water, letting the punch carve through empty space. Before the man could regain his balance, Eli's cane lashed out, striking the attacker's wrist with a sickening snap. A yelp of pain tore from the man's throat as he stumbled back, clutching his arm, his confidence crumbling. But there was no time to savor the moment. A second figure barreled in from Eli's left, the faint rustle of fabric and the scuff of boots betraying his approach. Though Eli's eyes saw only shadows, his other senses painted a vivid picture. He shifted, his cane sweeping low in a fluid motion, hooking the man's ankle and yanking hard. The attacker crashed to the pavement with a dull thud, his head smacking the ground, leaving him dazed and groaning. "Get him," snarled a wiry man, his voice sharp with disbelief and rising panic. Eli's breath remained steady, his mind a fortress of focus. Years of Navy SEAL training had forged him into something more than human, a weapon honed to thrive in chaos. His blindness wasn't a flaw, it was a puzzle he'd solved long ago, turning his other senses into allies. The gang hesitated, their taunts faltering into frustrated growls, but their pause was brief. They surged forward as a pack, their shouts echoing through the still night. Eli's world shrank to a symphony of sound and motion, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the whoosh of air as fists sliced toward him, the subtle vibrations of the pavement. Two attackers rushed him from opposite sides, hoping to overwhelm him with sheer force. Eli dropped low, letting their momentum betray them as they stumbled past. His cane snapped upward, driving into one man's stomach with a force that folded him in half, gasping for air. Without missing a beat, Eli pivoted, his elbow crashing into the second man's jaw, sending him reeling into the shadows. The gang's leader, a hulking figure with a voice like gravel, bellowed from the sidelines. "Stop screwing around." "Put him down," another attacker lunged, fingers outstretched to grapple Eli. But Eli flowed into the movement, seizing the man's wrist and twisting with practiced ease, using the man's own force against him. Eli flipped him onto the pavement, where he landed with a groan, clutching his twisted arm. Pain flared in Eli's ribs as a stray kick grazed him, forcing him to stagger. The gang was adapting, learning his rhythm, but Eli's training kept him one step ahead. He steadied himself, pain a familiar companion from countless battlefields. He'd faced worse than this. The wiry man, circling cautiously now, spat words laced with doubt. "Oi, boss. This guy's no regular blind man. He's trained." The leader shoved him forward, his voice a whip crack of fury. "Then stop fighting like idiots and take him out." Eli tightened his grip on his cane, sensing the leader's heavy footsteps drawing closer with intent. "You're too loud," Eli said, his voice a calm blade slicing through the chaos. The leader lunged, but Eli's cane whipped upward, cracking against the side of his head. The man staggered, clutching his temple, but Eli's victory was short-lived. Another gang member slipped through his guard, landing a brutal punch to his jaw. The impact rocked him, his world tilting for a heartbeat, but Eli gritted his teeth, his grip on the cane unyielding. "You've already lost," Eli said, his tone unshaken. Resolute, the leader, rubbing his head, glared through the haze of pain. "Not yet," he growled, motioning to his men. "Hit him from all sides. Don't let up." The gang roared, their frustration boiling over as they charged again, the night exploding into a whirlwind of violence. Eli centered himself, his breathing a steady rhythm amidst the storm. His SEAL training surged to the forefront: control, precision, survival. The first attacker came from his left, swinging a jagged bottle in a wild arc. Eli caught the faint whistle of glass and stepped inside the swing, seizing the man's wrist and twisting until the bottle clattered to the ground. A sharp strike to the man's temple sent him crumpling. Another rushed from behind, a steel pipe singing through the air. Eli ducked, the pipe grazing his hair, and spun low, his cane hooking the man's legs and sending him crashing to the pavement, the pipe skittering away. The wiry man, his skull tattoo glinting under the streetlight, faltered, his voice trembling. "You can't keep this up." Old man Eli turned toward him, his unseeing eyes steady as stone. "Try me." The man hesitated a moment too long, and Eli struck like lightning, his cane snapping into the man's wrist, then his knee, dropping him with a cry of agony. The leader's voice cracked with frustration. "What's wrong with you? He's just one guy." Two more charged, their movements sloppy with desperation. Eli let their wild swings miss, countering with surgical precision an elbow to one man's nose, a sickening crunch signaling his fall, and a jab to the other's ribs, followed by a cane strike to his back that left him sprawled beside his comrade. The leader cursed, backing away as Eli turned toward him. "You think you've won," he shouted, his voice fraying. "Axel's not gonna let this slide." The wiry man, clutching his bruised knee, scrambled to his feet. "I'm done," he yelled, limping into the shadows, another dragging his injured friend behind him, their retreat marked by curses and groans. Eli stood motionless, his senses tracking their fading footsteps. The leader, now alone with two of his men groaning on the ground, glared at Eli, his fury tinged with fear. "You've made a big mistake. Old man, Axel's gonna hear about this, and you're finished." Eli's stance didn't waver, his voice a quiet storm. "I'll be waiting." The leader spat on the ground, then vanished into the night, leaving his fallen men behind. Eli exhaled, his heart pounding but his resolve unbroken. The air grew still, the faint rustle of curtains betraying neighbors watching from their windows, the metallic tang of blood lingering. The fight was over for now. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the groans of the injured men and the distant hum of the city. Eli stood like a sentinel, his cane tapping softly as he approached the first man, who tried to scramble back but was pinned by his injured leg. "Stay back." The man choked, fear in his eyes. Eli tilted his head, his glassy eyes seeming to pierce the man's soul. "Who's Axel?" he asked, his voice low, commanding. The man clutched his knee, pale and trembling. "I don't know much, man. He's the boss. Tells us what to do." Eli crouched, his presence looming. "That's not enough. What does he want with this neighborhood?" "Why are you here?" The man swallowed hard, his eyes darting for an escape. "He wants to control businesses, houses, the whole block. People like you. You're in his way." Eli's jaw tightened. "People like me. Blind and black." The man flinched, stammering. "I didn't mean," Eli cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. "You came to my home. You started this. No excuses. Where do I find Axel?" A groan from the second man drew Eli's attention. He stood, walking over with measured steps. "You," Eli said, his tone unyielding. "Where does Axel operate?" The man coughed, spitting blood. "Warehouse by the docks. He runs everything from there. But you're crazy if you think you can take him. He'll kill you." Eli crouched again, his expression carved from stone. "He sent you here thinking I was weak. He's the one who miscalculated." The first man whimpered, his fear palpable. "Just let us go. Man, we're done. We won't come back." Eli's voice hardened, a promise etched in every word. "You'll go, but you'll tell Axel I'm coming for him." He stood, the weight of the night settling around him, his senses still sharp, ready for whatever came next. Under the dim glow of a street lamp, Eli stood over the two battered men, his silhouette sharp against the quiet night. "Stay put," he ordered, his voice low and unyielding. "Don't even think about moving." The men, bruised and bloodied, exchanged frantic looks but were too weak to defy him. Their bodies slumped against the pavement. Without another word, Eli turned and strode toward his house, his steps deliberate, carrying the weight of purpose. The men's shallow breaths were the only sounds piercing the stillness of the neighborhood. Moments later, Eli emerged, a thick coil of rope slung over his shoulder. The sight sent a jolt of fear through the first man, his eyes widening. What are you going to do with that?" he stammered, his voice trembling. Eli didn't answer right away. His movements were calm, almost methodical, as he approached them. "You came here to deliver a message," he said, his tone cold but steady. "Now you're going to help me send one back." The men squirmed, their protests feeble as Eli knelt beside them, binding their hands with practiced precision. Each knot was tight, secure, a testament to his control. The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath, the silence broken only by the men's pained groans. Once they were restrained, Eli stood, towering over them, his figure outlined by the faint streetlights. "Now," he said, his voice cutting through the night, "you're going to tell me everything about Axel." He tugged the rope's loose ends, pulling the men to their feet. They stumbled, wincing from their injuries, as Eli guided them toward his house. "Wait, what are you doing?" the wiry man asked, his voice cracking with panic. "You can't just drag us in there." Eli didn't falter, his steps resolute, his focus razor-sharp. Inside, the house was dimly lit, its sparse furniture casting eerie shadows across the walls. Eli maneuvered the men to a sturdy wooden chair in the center of the room, forcing them to sit before tying them tightly to it. The air felt heavy, oppressive, broken only by the men's ragged breathing. "Look," the first man said, struggling against the ropes. "Just call the cops. Man, we'll tell them everything. I swear. Let them handle it." Eli paused, looming over them, his eyes unreadable in the low light. "Call the cops," he repeated, a hint of mockery in his tone. "That's rich, coming from you." "Yeah, man," the wiry one blurted, his voice shaking. "They'll deal with this. You don't need to do anything else. We'll spill about Axel, just let us go." Eli tilted his head, his expression icy. "If you're scared of the police, you wouldn't have shown up here. But something tells me it's not the cops you're afraid of." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You're scared of me." The first man swallowed hard, his fear palpable. "We'll talk. Okay, just don't hurt us," he pleaded. Eli's gaze didn't waver. "You'll talk, but not to the police. Not yet. First, you're telling me everything about Axel, his operations, his plans, all of it." The wiry man squirmed, his eyes darting around the room. "What do you even want with Axel? You don't know who you're messing with. He runs everything, the warehouses, the streets. He's got people everywhere." Eli crossed his arms, standing tall. "Good. Start with the warehouses. How many are there? What's in them?" The first man's resolve crumbled, his words spilling out in a rush. "There's a big one by the docks. That's Axel's main spot. It's got everything, drugs, guns. He uses it to control the whole area. If you're in his way, he sends guys like us to take you out." Eli nodded, his face betraying nothing. "And who else works for him?" "How many men does he have?" The wiry man shook his head frantically. "Too many. Man, way too many for you to handle alone. If you go after him, you're done. You don't know what he'll do." Eli leaned closer, his voice steady. "That's not your problem. What else?" The first man hesitated, his lips trembling. "We don't know everything. All right? We're just small time. Axel gives us orders, and we follow them. That's it. We don't touch the big stuff." Eli studied them in silence, the weight of his presence suffocating. Then he straightened. That's enough for now, but don't think you're in the clear. What are you going to do with us? The wiry man asked, his voice breaking. Eli's expression remained unreadable as he turned toward a nearby table. That depends. If I think you're lying, you'll wish the cops were your only problem. The men exchanged terrified glances, their breaths uneven, the room thick with tension. You're crazy, the first man whispered, barely audible. Eli turned back, his stance calm but resolute. No, I'm a man protecting his home. Axel made a mistake coming after me. So did you. He stood motionless for a moment, the men's labored breathing filling the silence. Their eyes followed his every move as he crossed to a drawer and pulled it open. What are you doing now? The wiry man stammered, straining against his bonds. Eli didn't respond. From the drawer, he retrieved 2 large canvas bags, holding one up briefly. You wanted to send a message, he said, his voice steady. Now you're going to help me send one back. No, man, come on, the wiry man yelped, thrashing in his chair. We told you what you wanted. Eli's face remained impassive. And now I'm making sure Axel knows what happens when he comes after me. The other man froze, his eyes wide with terror. Please, just call the cops. We'll talk to them. Eli's tone sharpened. The cops don't scare Axel. But this will... Without another word, he pulled the first bag over the wiry man's head, muffling his frantic protests. He moved to the second man, ignoring his pleas, and did the same. Once their heads were covered, Eli untied the ropes securing them to the chairs, keeping their hands tightly bound. He yanked them to their feet, his grip firm. Move, he ordered, his voice cold. The men stumbled, blind and disoriented, as Eli led them toward the door. Outside, the night air was cool, the quiet street bathed in the pale flicker of a lone lamppost. Eli guided them to its base and forced them to sit, swiftly tying their ankles together and securing them to the pole. Please, one whimpered from beneath the bag. We're done. We won't come back. Eli stood over them, his voice unwavering. Good, because if I see you here again, this will feel like a kindness. The men fell silent, their breaths ragged. Eli turned, his steps measured as he walked back to his house. The neighborhood was still, though he sensed the cautious eyes of neighbors peering from behind curtains. He didn't need to see them to know they'd witnessed it all. Inside, Eli locked the door and leaned against the counter, exhaling deeply. His mind replayed the night the information he had extracted, the warehouse by the docks, Axel's grip on the area, the weapons and resources at his disposal. This wasn't just about him anymore. Axel's operation threatened the entire neighborhood, and Eli couldn't let that stand. He moved to the table, spreading out a large sheet of paper. With steady hands, he sketched a rough map of the docks from memory, each line deliberate, every detail calculated. Years of Navy SEAL training had honed his instincts, taught him the power of preparation. If Axel expected fear, he'd find defiance instead. Eli's jaw tightened as he marked the warehouse's location. Tonight had been a warning. The real battle was just beginning. The next evening, Eli navigated the quiet streets to Maya's diner, his cane tapping against the uneven pavement. The faint hum of distant cars and the vague glow of streetlights guided him, his senses sharp despite his limited vision. The bell above the diner door chimed softly as he entered, the warm scent of coffee and sizzling bacon wrapping around him like a familiar embrace. Maya looked up from behind the counter, her face creasing with concern. Eli, she said, hurrying over. What are you doing out so late? I need your help, Eli replied, his voice quiet but firm. Maya guided him to a booth, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. Once seated, she leaned in close. What's going on? Eli rested his hands on the table, his tone steady. There's a man named Axel trying to take over this neighborhood, and I can't stop him alone. In the heart of the neighborhood, a shadow loomed larger than any ordinary street gang. A man named Axel was orchestrating a takeover, his sights set on homes, businesses every corner of the community. His base of operations was a nondescript warehouse nestled by the docks, a hub for his illicit empire. Maya's eyes widened in shock as Eli revealed the name. Axel, I've never heard of him, she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Eli's expression remained steady, his tone unshaken. The men who came after me, they worked for him. They spilled his name. Maya's brow creased with concern. Came after you, Eli. What happened? Eli's response was matter-of-fact, almost understated. They jumped me. Thought I'd be easy prey. They learned otherwise. Maya's jaw dropped, worry flooding her face. You should have told someone. You can't take this on alone. Eli cut her off gently but firmly. I know. That's why I'm here. Maya, I need your help. This isn't just about me. If Axel isn't stopped, he'll swallow everything we've built here. Maya nodded, her apprehension lingering but her resolve beginning to solidify. Okay, what do you need? People I can trust, Eli said without hesitation. People who care about this place as much as we do. They don't need to throw punches. Just help me gather intel. Maya's fingers drummed thoughtfully on the table. I can think of a few. Jenkins, who runs the hardware store he's fed up with the gang hassling his customers. And Angie, from the laundromat. She's got a knack for picking up every whisper that floats through this neighborhood. Eli's face brightened slightly. That's a solid start. We need to dig up everything we can on Axel, how many men he's got, what they're protecting, their schedules. The more we know, the better we can outmaneuver him. By the next evening, Eli's modest living room had transformed into a makeshift war room. Maya had rallied a small but determined crew. Jenkins, a wiry older man with a face etched by years of hard work, and Angie, a sharp-eyed woman whose quiet confidence filled the space. Jenkins leaned against the wall, arms crossed. So, Eli, what's this all about? Maya said, you've got a mess that needs cleaning. Eli nodded, his voice clear and unwavering. There's a man named Axel running a criminal operation out of a warehouse by the docks. Drugs, weapons, cash. He's not just stirring trouble, he's trying to claim this entire neighborhood. We're standing in his way. Angie's arms folded tightly across her chest. Axel, never heard the name. You sure about this? Eli met her gaze, unflinching. I'm sure. The men who attacked me were his. They said Axel's out to control at all our homes, our shops, our lives. If we don't act now, he'll choke this place until there's nothing left to save. Jenkins scowled, rubbing his jaw. And what do you expect us to do? We're not exactly a militia. Eli's response was calm but resolute. I'm not asking you to fight. I need eyes and ears. We need to know how many men Axel has, their routines, where their operations' weak spots are. Maya chimed in, her voice steady. If we can map out their moves, we can hit them where it hurts without putting everyone in danger. Jenkins sighed, scratching the back of his neck. I've got some old gear in the shop. Could rig up something to make a racket if we need to throw them off. Angie's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. And I can spread the word carefully. People talk when they think no one's listening. Eli leaned forward, his voice a quiet anchor in the room. This isn't just my fight, it's ours. Axel thinks he can steamroll us. We're going to prove him wrong. The group exchanged glances, the weight of their mission settling over them like a heavy fog. Slowly, nods rippled through the room, their determination taking root. Eli stood in the dim glow of his living room, the faint silhouettes of his neighbors barely discernible. A worn map of the docks sprawled across the coffee table, surrounded by scraps of paper and a collection of small tools Jenkins had hauled from his store. The air buzzed with tension, but beneath it, a shared sense of purpose was growing. First step, Eli said, his voice steady, is intel. We need eyes on that warehouse shift changes, deliveries, any patterns we can use. Angie leaned over the map, her finger tracing a rough line. There's a back alley here, near the warehouse. I've seen their trucks rolling through. I can set up there, keep watch, see what I can pick up. Jenkins nodded, holding up a tangled bundle of old car alarms, and I can rig these to go off on command. Set them up to pull their focus when we need it. Eli's lips twitched in approval. Smart. We also need to make sure no one in the neighborhood tips Axel's crew off. His men are paranoid, but someone desperate might talk. Maya crossed her arms, her expression resolute. I've got that covered. People open up at the diner. I'll make sure the wrong ears don't catch wind of this. The room fell quiet, the gravity of their plans sinking in. Then Angie broke the silence, her voice cautious but firm. I get why we're doing this, but shouldn't the police handle it? If Axel's moving drugs and weapons, that's their job, not ours. Eli's head tilted slightly, his unseeing eyes catching the faint light. The police, he said, his tone calm but edged with steel. You think they don't know? Angie frowned, confused. What do you mean? Eli's voice hardened, each word deliberate. They know exactly what's going on, but they're either on Axel's payroll or too scared to touch him. Either way, they're useless to us. Jenkins leaned back, his face grim. He's right. I've seen Axel's guys lounging around the precinct like they own it. They're untouchable because they know no one's coming for them. Angie hesitated, glancing at Maya. So it's really just us. Maya's voice was soft but unyielding. It's always been just us. That's why we're fighting. If we don't, no one will. Eli leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. We're not just protecting ourselves. We're standing up for everyone in this neighborhood who's too afraid to fight. If Axel wins, he'll strip this place bare. We can't let that happen. The room grew still, but this time the silence was charged with resolve. Angie nodded, her jaw set. What's next? Eli tapped the map. We work in shifts. Jenkins, set up your distractions near the alley. Angie, track the warehouse every move they make. Maya, keep the neighborhood steady. Make sure no one gets suspicious. I'll pull it all together and step in when the time comes. Got it, Jenkins said, already sifting through his tools. Let's do this, Maya added, standing with quiet fire in her eyes. The group dispersed, their shared determination a palpable force as they began their preparations. Eli lingered for a moment, listening to the soft rustle of movement and murmured plans. The fight was far from won, but for the first time they had a plan in each other. The days that followed were a whirlwind of clandestine activity. Eli anchored the operation, coordinating their efforts with a quiet intensity. His damaged vision blurred the details, but his heightened senses and razor-sharp instincts kept him attuned to every shift in their progress. Jenkins rigged his distractions, crude but effective car alarms wired to blare at the press of a button. They're not fancy, he admitted, showing Eli the trigger mechanism, but they'll make enough noise to rattle anyone nearby. Eli nodded. They don't need to be perfect. They just need to buy us time. Meanwhile, Angie set up her surveillance post in a boarded-up building overlooking the docks. Hidden in the shadows, she tracked the warehouse's rhythm shift changes, delivery schedules, the ebb and flow of Axel's crew, her notebook filled with meticulous details. One evening, she huddled with Maya and Eli in the diner, her voice low as she shared her findings. They're disciplined, she said, tapping her notes. About 12 to 15 men cycle through, 2 shifts every 12 hours. The real action kicks off around 10 p.m. That's when the trucks roll in. Trucks, Eli asked, leaning closer. Angie nodded. Big ones. Couldn't see the cargo, but if I had to bet, it's drugs or weapons. They unload fast and hustle everything inside. Eli's mind churned, piecing together the puzzle. Good. We'll use Jenkins' alarms to sow chaos during their peak hour. If we can split their focus, we'll have a shot at slipping in. Maya's brow furrowed. What about Axel himself? Did you see him? Angie shook her head. Not yet. But his men talk about him. They're terrified of him. And he's not just pulling strings from afar. He's in and out of the warehouse constantly. Eli's expression tightened. That's good. If he's hands-on, he's predictable. We can anticipate his moves. As the plan solidified, the group found their rhythm. Maya wove through the neighborhood, her easy charm at the diner keeping suspicions at bay while she ensured no one betrayed their cause. Jenkins planted his devices strategically around the docks, testing them to perfection. Angie sharpened her observations, pinpointing vulnerabilities in the warehouse's defenses. Eli pored over the map for hours, memorizing every detail and bracing for the confrontation he knew was coming. One evening, as Eli reviewed the plan, Maya's voice cut through his focus. "You've got to let us take on more. Eli, you can't carry this alone." Eli's response was calm but firm. "I'm not alone. You're all in this with me. But if Axel shows his face, he'll come for me. I need to be ready." Maya's eyes brimmed with concern. "You know they'll outnumber you." Eli's lips curved faintly, a spark of defiance in his tone. "They'll underestimate me. They always do." By week's end, the pieces were in place. The map on Eli's coffee table was now a battle plan, marked with notes and dotted with Jenkins' tools. The neighborhood hummed with quiet defiance, its people unaware of the fight brewing in its shadows. Eli stood at the center, his resolve unyielding. The road ahead was treacherous, but with his team by his side, he felt the stirrings of hope. Axel thought he could break them. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. In the dim glow of a single flickering bulb, a worn wooden table stood at the heart of the team's makeshift headquarters, its surface etched with a labyrinth of notes and markings. Every route, every potential snag, every distraction had been painstakingly charted. The plan as intricate as a spider's web. The team huddled around it one final time, the air thick with anticipation and the unspoken weight of what lay ahead. Eli, their leader, stood at the head of the table, his voice calm but resolute as he laid out the roles. "Angie, you'll give the signal when the trucks roll in," he said, his milky, unseeing eyes seeming to pierce through the room's tension. "Jenkins, you're on distractions. Make sure the guards are drawn away. Maya, you'll hold the fort here, keeping an eye on the neighborhood. Once the warehouse is exposed, I'll slip in and handle the rest." Jenkins, his brow furrowed with doubt, leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "You're telling me you're going to take down Axel's entire operation solo? That's a tall order. Eli, even for you." Eli's expression didn't waver, his tone steady as stone. "I'm not tearing the place apart. I'm going after Axel himself. Once I get him to shut it down, his crew will scatter like roaches in the light." He paused, his jaw tightening. "If he doesn't cooperate, I'll make sure he's no longer a threat to anyone." The room fell silent, the gravity of Eli's words settling over them like a heavy fog. Angie exchanged a quick glance with Jenkins, her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. Maya, ever the steady presence, broke the quiet. "We'll be ready, Eli, whatever it takes." Eli gave a curt nod, his fingers brushing the map's edges as if committing every detail to memory. "This neighborhood has held its ground for generations. Axel's not taking it from us, not while we're still standing." With that, the team dispersed, their resolve hardened like steel. Eli lingered at the table, alone now, his calloused hands tracing the map's lines one last time. The fight ahead would be his most perilous yet, but retreat wasn't in his nature. The night was still as Eli melted into the shadows near the docks, the cool breeze carrying the briny tang of salt water mixed with the sharp bite of oil. His ears caught the distant rumble of a truck engine, growing louder with each heartbeat. Right on cue, Angie's signal, a faint series of taps against the boarded-up window of her hideout, confirmed the truck's arrival. Eli shifted his weight, his cane resting lightly in his hand. His vision, limited to blurry outlines and faint glows, caught the headlights' dim shimmer, enough to anchor his focus. Every sound, every vibration in the air, painted a map in his mind. "Jenkins," Eli murmured into the small radio clipped to his jacket, his voice barely a whisper. "It's time." "Got it," Jenkins replied, his voice crackling faintly. A moment later, the night erupted with the shrill wail of a car alarm, slicing through the silence. Shouts burst from the warehouse as guards scrambled toward the noise, their flashlight beams slashing wildly through the darkness. Eli seized the moment, gliding silently along the building's perimeter, his steps as precise as a predator's. From her vantage point, Angie watched the chaos unfold, her sharp eyes tracking the guards' movements. 6 of them heading west. She whispered into her radio. That leaves 5 at the entrance. Eli nodded to himself, calculating. Jenkins hit the second distraction. Another alarm blared, this time from the opposite direction. The remaining guards hesitated, torn between their posts and the new threat. Now's your window, Angie urged softly. Eli moved like a shadow, his steps swift yet silent. The faint outlines of crates and machinery near the entrance provided cover as he crept closer. The air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and gasoline, the dim overhead lights casting long, jagged shadows. Inside the warehouse, muffled voices rose in confusion. Axel's men, scrambling to make sense of the disruptions. Eli's heightened senses tracked every sound: the scuff of boots, the clatter of equipment, the low hum of tension. He froze as a lone guard approached, his footsteps heavy and careless. Eli crouched behind a crate, his grip on his cane tightening. As the guard passed, Eli struck with lethal precision, his cane sweeping low to clip the man's knee. The guard crumpled with a stifled groan, and Eli delivered a swift blow to his temple, ensuring he stayed down. Angie, Eli whispered into the radio. Status. 2 more heading toward the loading area, she replied. Axel might be alone inside now. Understood, Eli said, his voice unshaken. He pressed deeper into the warehouse, navigating the maze of crates and equipment with uncanny ease. His training outshone his impaired vision, every sound and vibration guiding him like a beacon. Ahead, a sharp, commanding voice cut through the din, a voice Eli recognized instantly. You idiots can't handle one night without screwing it up, Axel barked, his tone dripping with contempt. Eli's jaw clenched. That was his target. He edged closer, his steps silent, until he could make out Axel's blurred silhouette, a tall, imposing figure standing near a cluttered desk. Eli crouched low, his breath steady, the moment he'd prepared for now within reach. The neighborhood's survival hinged on what happened next. The warehouse air was thick with the scent of oil and sawdust, the cavernous space echoing with the distant shouts of Axel's scattered men. Eli crouched behind a stack of crates, his head tilted as he tracked the faint blurs of movement ahead. The chaos outside Jenkins' distractions had worked, thinning the guards inside, but the job wasn't done. To reach Axel, Eli had to clear the remaining obstacles one by one. A guard rounded the corner, his steps clumsy, his breathing uneven. Eli held perfectly still, his senses locked onto the man's position. As the guard passed, Eli struck, his cane hooking the man's ankle and yanking him off balance. The guard hit the ground with a thud, and before he could cry out, Eli's cane found his temple, silencing him. Eli dragged the body into the shadows, ensuring it wouldn't be found. 2 more guards stood near the loading bay, their blurry figures outlined under the dim lights. You think it's just kids messing with us? One muttered, his voice tight with irritation. Who cares? The other snapped. If Axel finds out we didn't handle it, we're done. Eli's lips twitched in a faint smirk. Fear of Axel was their weakness, and he'd use it. He crept closer, using the crates for cover, then struck with ruthless efficiency. His cane swept low, buckling the first guard's knee. The second lunged, but Eli sidestepped, his cane cracking against the man's wrist, sending a blade clattering to the floor. A sharp jab to the ribs dropped the guard, leaving both out cold. Footsteps echoed nearby. Another guard. Cautious, weapon drawn. Eli pressed against the crates, waiting. You see anything? The guard called, his voice laced with nerves. Eli let the silence stretch, feeling the man's hesitation. When the guard was close, Eli moved, disarming him with a quick strike and twisting his arm until he collapsed, a final blow knocking him out. The warehouse fell eerily quiet, the only sound Axel's voice, sharp and enraged. From deeper inside, you useless fools. How hard is it to keep one place locked down? He roared. Eli's grip on his cane tightened. He moved toward the sound, each step deliberate, guided by the faint blurs of light and shadow. The warehouse opened into a wide loading area, where Axel stood near a desk littered with papers and weapons, his posture radiating authority. Two guards flanked him, tense as he berated them. Eli needed them gone first. He crept along the room's edge, his breath steady. One guard stepped away, his footsteps faint. Eli seized the chance, his cane knocking the man's weapon away before a blow to the ribs dropped him. The second guard spun, raising his gun, but Eli was faster, disarming him with a strike to the wrist and a knee to the chest. Both guards lay crumpled, and Axel turned, his face twisting with fury. "Who the hell?" Axel began, but Eli stepped from the shadows, his white, glassy eyes fixed on Axel's blurred form. "It's over," Eli said, his voice calm but unyielding. Axel sneered, reaching for a blade on the desk. "You think you can waltz in here and take me out? You're blinder than I thought." Eli's grip tightened, his stance unshaken. The final showdown was here, and he was ready. Axel's eyes narrowed, his breathing heavy in the tense silence. As Eli stepped closer, the weight of the neighborhood's future resting on this moment. The warehouse was a cavern of shadows, its air thick with the scent of oil and rust. Eli stood firm against the cold concrete, his senses razor sharp despite the darkness that clouded his eyes. He knew exactly where he was and who stood before him. Axel, a man swollen with arrogance, believed he could seize whatever he desired without resistance. His laughter cut through the silence, sharp and joyless. His body coiled with barely restrained fury. "You don't stop someone like me?" Axel sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You don't even slow me down. I built this empire from nothing, and you think you can just waltz in and dismantle it? You're blind, broken, and utterly useless." Eli's voice sliced through Axel's tirade, calm and unyielding. "You're unraveling. Axel, if you were truly in control, you wouldn't be here, bellowing at your own men for their failures." Axel's face twisted, his fists balling tightly at his sides as he glared at the unconscious guards sprawled across the warehouse floor. "They're fools," he spat, his eyes blazing. "Letting some nobody stroll in here and make a mockery of them, but that changes nothing. You don't belong here, never have, never will." Eli's jaw tightened, his tone sharpening like a blade. "This isn't about me. It's about the people in this neighborhood, the ones you think you can bully, rob, and dominate." Axel took a menacing step forward, his sneer widening. "The people in this neighborhood. You mean your kind always complaining, always playing the victim, always pointing fingers for your own failures?" Eli's grip on his cane tightened, but his face remained a mask of composure. "This isn't about blame. It's about justice, something you'll never grasp." Axel's hand slammed down on a nearby desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Justice," he roared. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing but a blind fool who doesn't know when he's out of his depth." Eli's voice dropped, steady and deliberate. "I may be blind, but I see you clearly a coward cloaking himself in hatred because you're too weak to lead without it." Axel's face contorted with rage, his sneer deepening into something feral. "You think you're better than me, better than my men. You're all the same talking tough until someone like me steps in, and then you crumble." Eli took a slow, deliberate step forward, his presence unshaken. "The only one crumbling here is you. Your men are scattered, your operation is in shambles, and now you're alone. You've already lost. Axel, the only question is how far you'll sink before you face it." Axel's growl was primal, his fury boiling over as he snatched a crowbar from the desk. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Not until I say it is." Eli adjusted his stance, his cane poised, his focus unyielding. "Then say it," he replied, his voice a calm challenge. With a guttural roar, Axel charged, the crowbar gleaming faintly under the warehouse's dim lights. His heavy footsteps reverberated against the concrete, each one a drumbeat of rage. Eli braced himself, his heightened senses tracking the vibrations of Axel's approach and the faint outline of the weapon slicing through the air. The crowbar swung down with brutal force, but Eli sidestepped at the last second, the metal crashing against the floor with a deafening clang that echoed through the vast space. Axel recovered swiftly, swinging again in a wide, vicious arc. Eli raised his cane, blocking the blow with a sharp crack that rang out like a warning. "You're quick," Axel spat, his breath ragged with exertion. "But that's all you've got." Eli remained silent, his focus locked on the rhythm of Axel's movements. He could feel the raw power in every swing, the unbridled aggression fueling each attack. It was relentless, forcing Eli to stay on the defensive. Dodging and parrying as the crowbar came at him from every angle, Axel swung low, aiming for Eli's legs. Eli leaped back, but his balance faltered as the edge of the crowbar grazed his shin, sending a jolt of pain through him. He gritted his teeth, steadying himself against the sting. Not so untouchable now. "Are you Axel taunted?" His grin widening with cruel satisfaction. Eli adjusted his grip on the cane, his breathing controlled. "You talk too much." In a sudden burst of motion, he lunged forward, his cane striking Axel's wrist with pinpoint precision. The crowbar slipped from Axel's grasp, clattering to the floor with a hollow ring. Eli pressed his advantage, delivering a swift strike to Axel's side. The blow forced a grunt from Axel, but he retaliated with a savage punch to Eli's ribs, sending him stumbling back. Pain flared through Eli's torso, his limited vision blurring further as the world spun for a moment. He steadied himself, listening intently for Axel's next move. "You don't belong here," Axel bellowed, his voice echoing off the warehouse walls. He lunged, tackling Eli with brute force. The two men hit the ground hard, the impact jarring every bone in Eli's body. Axel's weight pinned him down, his fists swinging wildly toward Eli's face. Eli blocked as best he could, his arms absorbing the brunt of the blows. With a desperate twist, he used his legs to shift Axel's weight, rolling them over. Now on top, Eli drove a sharp elbow into Axel's jaw, the crack of bone reverberating through the room. Axel roared in pain, shoving Eli off with surprising strength. Both men scrambled to their feet, breathing heavily. Eli felt the ache in his ribs and the sting of cuts on his arms, but his focus never wavered. Axel, snarling, grabbed a heavy chain from the ground and swung it in a wide arc, the metal whistling through the air. Eli ducked, the chain narrowly missing his head. He moved quickly, closing the distance before Axel could swing again. His cane struck Axel's hand, forcing him to drop the chain. But Axel's knees shot up, slamming into Eli's stomach and sending him staggering backward. "You think you're a hero?" Axel snarled, advancing with his fists raised. "You're just a blind fool who doesn't know when he's beaten." Eli steadied himself, his cane raised defensively, his breath coming in controlled bursts. Axel was strong and unpredictable, but his rage made him sloppy. Eli could exploit that. The two men clashed again, Axel's fists swinging wildly while Eli countered with precise, calculated strikes. Every hit Axel landed took its toll, the bruises and cuts mounting. But Eli's training kept him upright. His movements were deliberate, designed to wear Axel down and capitalize on his growing frustration. The fight raged on, brutal and unrelenting. The warehouse filled with the sounds of Axel's shouts and the dull thud of blows. Eli's senses remained sharp, his body moving instinctively as the battle pressed on. He could feel the end drawing near, but Axel wasn't done yet. "You think this is over?" Axel snarled, his voice a raw echo. "My men are coming back. You think a few distractions will stop them? They'll be here any minute, and when they find you, they'll rip you apart." Eli didn't respond, his focus locked on the vibrations of Axel's movements. Every bruise and cut screamed for him to stop, but he pushed through. This had to end now. Axel lunged, grabbing a heavy crate from a nearby stack and hurling it toward Eli. The crash of splintering wood filled the room as Eli ducked, narrowly avoiding the debris. He felt the air shift as Axel closed in again, his footsteps pounding against the concrete. "You're just one man." Axel spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Blind, weak, and alone. You really think you can stop me? I own this place. I own this neighborhood." Eli steadied himself, his grip on the cane unwavering. Not anymore. Axel charged, his arms swinging in wide, reckless arcs. Eli dodged the first blow, then the second. His movements tight and controlled, but Axel's strength was relentless. His fists connecting with Eli's shoulder and ribs. The impact sent Eli staggering, pain flaring through his body. You can't win. Axel shorted, his confidence surging as he pressed the attack. You're nothing without your sight. You're nothing. Eli exhaled sharply, his mind racing. Axel's strength was overwhelming, but his movements were predictable, driven by brute force rather than strategy. Eli knew he had one chance to end this, a calculated risk. As Axel swung again, his fists aiming for Eli's chest, Eli stepped into the attack, using his cane to deflect the blow just enough to lessen its impact. He let Axel's momentum carry him forward. In that split second, Eli struck, driving his cane into Axel's midsection with all the force he could muster. The blow was precise, targeting the solar plexus and knocking the wind out of Axel. Axel staggered back, gasping for air, his arms flailing. Eli didn't let up. Moving swiftly, he swept Axel's legs out from under him with his cane. Axel crashed to the ground, the sound reverberating through the warehouse like a final verdict. The air grew still, the echoes of their battle fading into silence. Eli stood over him, his breath heavy but steady, his cane still poised. The fight was over, but the weight of what it represented lingered a stand against tyranny, a spark of justice in a neighborhood long oppressed. In the dim, flickering light of the warehouse, Eli's voice cut through the air, steady but unyielding. You're done, Axel. His words carried the weight of finality, a promise forged in resolve. Axel, sprawled on the cold concrete, let out a guttural groan, his body twisting as he tried to claw his way back to defiance. My men, they'll tear you apart, he rasped, his voice brittle but still laced with venom. Eli stepped closer, his cane raised like a judge's gavel, its polished wood gleaming faintly in the shadows. Your men are scattered, your empire's crumbling, and you, Eli's tone sharpened. You're not walking away from this. With a swift, deliberate motion, Eli brought the cane down on Axel's shoulder, the strike precise and crippling. Axel's cry echoed through the cavernous space, his body collapsing under the blow. The warehouse fell silent, the fading reverberations of their brutal confrontations swallowed by the stillness. Eli stood over his fallen foe, chest heaving, his grip on the cane unwavering despite the fire pulsing through his battered frame. You lost, he said, his voice low and resolute. This neighborhood was never yours. It never will be. Axel groaned again, his strength drained, his body motionless in defeat. Eli tilted his head slightly, catching the faint wail of a car alarm, Jenkins's distraction still pulsing in the distance. Axel's men were too scattered to return anytime soon, giving Eli the window he needed to finish what he'd started. His breathing was ragged but controlled as he stood over Axel's crumpled form, the faint crackle of the radio clipped to his jacket breaking the silence. Eli, Angie's voice came through, taut with urgency. The alarms won't hold them much longer. You've got 5 minutes, tops. Before they're back. Eli exhaled, his mind racing. He glanced toward the desk where Axel had been barking orders earlier. Though his vision was limited, he could make out the vague shapes of paper strewn across its surface, blurred outlines that might hold the key to dismantling Axel's operation. Understood, he replied into the radio, his voice calm despite the ticking clock. Hold your position. I'll send what I can. Be quick, Angie urged. Eli moved to the desk, his cane tapping lightly against the debris-strewn floor as he navigated the chaos. His fingers brushed over the papers, identifying them by touch lists of names, addresses, and numbers, receipts and shipping manifests, their textures distinct under his calloused hands. He gathered as much as he could, folding the documents with care before tucking them into his jacket. His hand grazed the edge of the desk, landing on a small recording device. He pressed its buttons experimentally, and a faint click gave way to Axel's voice, cold and commanding. Shipments go out every Thursday at 10 p.m. Don't screw this up. We've got buyers waiting, and I won't tolerate delays. Eli stopped the playback, slipping the device into his pocket. It was damning evidence, enough to unravel Axel's network. The radio crackled again. Eli, 2 trucks are heading your way, Jenkins warned, his voice tight. Less than 3 minutes out, Eli turned toward his warehouse's side exit, his grip on the cane firm. Acknowledge, he said, his tone steady. Axel stirred on the floor, his voice a weak snarl. You think this changes anything? My men will destroy you. Eli crouched beside him, his voice low and cutting. You're finished, Axel. Your men won't save you. By the time they figure out what's happened, your operation will be ashes. Axel's glare burned with hatred, but he had no strength left to respond. Eli rose and moved swiftly toward the exit, every step calculated. His limited sight caught the faint glow of approaching headlights, a stark reminder that time was slipping away. He stepped outside, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the stifling tension of the warehouse. From his jacket, he pulled a small pouch he'd prepared earlier, securing the evidence inside. Angie, he said into the radio, I'm dropping the package at the rendezvous. Make sure it gets to Maya. On it, Angie replied. Eli placed the pouch in a concealed spot near the loading bay, ensuring it would be retrieved safely. He turned back toward the warehouse, his senses razor sharp. The rumble of engines grew louder, the ground vibrating beneath his feet as Axel's men closed in. He tapped the radio again. Jenkins, are the fallback distractions ready? Set, Jenkins replied. I'll trigger them when you're clear. Good. Stand by, Eli said, moving quickly to his next position. The tension was electric, every second stretching as he worked against the clock. The fight wasn't over, but he'd given the neighborhood a fighting chance to break Axel's hold for good. Slipping through the warehouse's side door, Eli steadied his breathing, ignoring the sharp ache in his ribs. Outside, blaring alarms and flashing lights tore through the docks, drawing Axel's men toward Jenkins's carefully orchestrated chaos. Their shouts grew louder as they scrambled to pinpoint the source. Eli, you're clear on the east side. Angie's voice crackled over the radio. But they're catching on fast. You've got about a minute. Eli didn't respond, conserving his energy for the sprint to the perimeter. His limited vision caught the faint outline of the warehouse fence ahead, and every vibration and muffled footstep guided his path. The weight of the evidence in his jacket spurred him on. He reached the gate and slipped through, his movements swift and precise. The sound of boots pounding concrete echoed behind him, closer than he'd hoped. Move it, Eli! Jenkins' voice cut through, sharp and urgent. As the glow of the van's headlights came into view, Eli rushed toward the vehicle, the steady hum of its idling engine anchoring his focus. He yanked the door open and climbed in, wincing as his ribs protested. Jenkins floored the gas, steering them into the labyrinth of dockside streets. They're swarming the place, Jenkins said, glancing in the rearview mirror. If you'd been 30 seconds slower. I wasn't, Eli interrupted, his voice calm but firm. He leaned back, steadying his breathing as the van rumbled through the darkened streets. They headed for the garage behind Maya's diner, the tension in the van thick despite their escape. Angie was waiting when they arrived, arms crossed, her expression taut with worry. Maya stood in the doorway, her face etched with concern but resolute. As the van rolled to a stop, Eli stepped out, handing Angie the pouch. This is everything, he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion seeping into his bones. Documents, recordings enough to bury Axel, but we can't hand it over to just anyone. Angie frowned, opening the pouch and scanning its contents with sharp eyes. You think some of the cops are in on it? I know they are, Eli replied. Axel's been operating too freely for too long. He's got people on his payroll. If we give this to the wrong person, it'll vanish. Inside the diner, the group gathered around a table cluttered with evidence. Angie sifted through the papers with precision, while Maya watched quietly. Arms folded, Jenkins leaned against the wall, his expression thoughtful. This is solid, Angie said, holding up a ledger. Names, addresses, money trails. If we can tie this to the right people, Axel's done. Assuming we can find someone we can trust, Jenkins added, skepticism lacing his voice. Cops like Ruiz might do the right thing, but how many others will? Eli nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. We test them first. We don't hand over everything at once, just enough to see who's willing to act and who looks the other way. And if they don't act, Maya asked, her voice tinged with worry. Then we keep looking, Eli said firmly. We find someone who will. Over the next 2 days, the group worked tirelessly, probing the precinct for allies. Maya asked discreet questions of her diner's regulars, while Angie cross-referenced names in the evidence with rumors of corruption. Jenkins tested officers by reporting minor gang activity, watching who responded and who ignored it. By the third evening, patterns emerged. Officer Ruiz and a small group of his colleagues consistently acted on reports, stood firm against gang influence, and showed a commitment to the community. Angie laid out their findings on the table, her voice calm but resolute. Ruiz is clean. He's got a few people he trusts. If we're going to move, it has to be through him. Maya nodded, her gaze shifting to Eli. But what if Axel's watching Ruiz? If we hand over too much too fast, it could put him in danger. Eli's expression didn't waver. We give him just enough to make a move something small, actionable, enough to force Axel's operation to react without showing our full hand. Once we see how Ruiz handles it, we'll know how far we can trust him. The team exchanged glances, their determination solidifying despite the risks. Jenkins leaned forward, tapping the table. Whatever we give him, it better hit hard. Axel needs to know we're not messing around. Eli straightened, his grip firm on his cane. He'll know. And once Ruiz moves, Axel's hold on this neighborhood will start to crack. The room fell quiet, the weight of their mission settling over them. They weren't just fighting Axel, they were fighting for their home, their lives, and their future together. They were ready to see it through. The street was hushed as Eli, Angie, and Jenkins waited near the corner where Officer Ruiz was set to patrol. The cool night air carried the faint hum of distant traffic, but the shadows around them were heavy with anticipation. "You sure about this?" Jenkins muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Eli didn't answer, his focus fixed on the task ahead. The evidence in his jacket felt heavier than ever, a reminder of what was at stake. Ruiz's patrol was their next step, and every moment now was a step closer to breaking Axel's grip or falling into his trap. Under the flickering glow of a street lamp, Eli leaned against the post, his sharp eyes sweeping the shadowed street. The pouch of evidence weighed heavy in his pocket, a ticking bomb that could either save them or send them all to ruin. He could just as easily take it and turn us in, Jenkins muttered, his voice low, laced with doubt. Eli's response was steady, unshaken. "We don't have a choice. Ruiz has a history of standing up to men like Axel. He's our best hope." Nearby, Angie stood with her arms crossed, her posture rigid with tension. "You'd better be right about this." "Eli," she said, her tone sharp. "If Ruiz is dirty, this whole plan goes up in flames." Eli didn't answer, his head tilting slightly as the faint echo of footsteps reached him. Ruiz was near. Moments later, the officer emerged at the street's edge, his patrol slow, deliberate. His uniform caught the dim light, and he moved with the heavy gait of someone who'd seen too much of the city's underbelly. Eli stepped forward, his cane tapping softly against the pavement as he emerged from the darkness. "Officer Ruiz," he called, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. Ruiz froze, his hand instinctively drifting to his holster. "Who's there?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing. "Someone who needs your help," Eli replied, his tone measured. Ruiz's gaze flicked to Angie and Jenkins, who lingered just beyond the circle of light. "You're playing a risky game, approaching me like this," Ruiz said, his voice tight. "Who are you?" Eli took a slow step closer, his movements careful, deliberate. "Someone who knows you've been fighting to protect this neighborhood. We have something that can help you bring down the people destroying it." Ruiz's frown deepened, but his hand eased away from his weapon. "What are you talking about?" Angie stepped forward, holding out the pouch of evidence. This, she said, her voice firm, unyielding. Names, ledgers, recordings enough to bury Axel and his entire operation. Ruiz's eyes narrowed as he took the pouch, his movements cautious, like he was handling something that could burn him. He opened it, pulling out a stack of papers, his brow furrowing as he scanned the contents. "This is heavy," he said after a long pause, his voice a mix of intrigue and wariness. "Where'd you get it?" "From the source," Eli said coolly. "Axel's warehouse. That's just a fraction of what he's doing." Ruiz's gaze snapped back to Eli, his expression hardening. "You broke into Axel's operation. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is?" "We know," Angie cut in, her voice sharp. "That's why we need you to act. You've seen what Axel's done to this neighborhood. This is your chance to stop him." Ruiz exhaled, running a hand through his hair, the weight of the moment settling over him. If this is real, it's enough to get a warrant, maybe even kick off a full investigation. But if Axel's got people inside the precinct, and I'm damn sure he does, this could blow up in all our faces. "That's why we came to you," Eli said, his voice steady, unwavering. "You've stood up to him before. We need someone we can trust." Ruiz studied them for a long, tense moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "All right, I'll take this to someone I know I can trust. But if this goes south, It won't," Eli interrupted, his tone firm. "Just make sure it gets to the right hands." Ruiz tucked the pouch into his jacket, his shoulders stiff with the burden he now carried. "You've put a target on your backs doing this," he said, his voice low. "Stay out of sight and let me handle it from here." Eli nodded, stepping back into the shadows. "We're counting on you, Ruiz." The officer gave them one last glance before continuing down the street, his steps heavier now, weighed down by the responsibility he carried. As his silhouette faded into the night, Angie let out a slow, shaky breath. "Well, that's done. Let's hope he's as clean as we think he is." "He will be," Eli said quietly, his voice steady with conviction. Now we wait. The group slipped back into the darkness, their work for the night done, the future of their fight now resting in Ruiz's hands. The next morning, Eli sat at his small kitchen table, the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains. His body ached from the night's ordeal, every bruise a reminder of how close they'd come to disaster. His cane leaned against the wall nearby, its familiar weight a quiet comfort in the deceptive calm of the morning. But beneath the stillness, Eli could feel it a storm was brewing, a lingering tension that something was about to break. He didn't have to wait long. A sharp, deliberate knock shattered the silence, followed by a voice that sent a chill through him. Eli, it barked, deep and commanding, unmistakable. "Axel." Eli's heart tightened, but his face remained impassive. He reached for his cane as the knock came again, harder, more insistent. "I know you're in there," Axel growled. "You didn't think I'd let last night slide. Did you open the damn door?" Eli rose slowly, his senses sharpening as he tuned into the vibrations of heavy footsteps on the porch, the low murmurs of multiple voices. Axel hadn't come alone. The door rattled with a forceful kick. "I'm giving you one chance," Axel called. "Open up, or we're coming in." Eli's grip on his cane tightened, his stance steady as he positioned himself in the center of the room. His mind raced, calculating his options. He'd faced worse odds before, but the cramped space and their numbers stacked the deck against him. With a deafening crack, the door burst open, the frame splintering as Axel stormed in, his tall, broad figure a blur of menace. Several of his men followed, their heavy footsteps filling the room with an oppressive presence. "You've got some nerve," Axel said, his voice sharp, seething with barely contained rage. "You think you can humiliate me? Waltz into my warehouse, take what's mine, and just walk away." Eli stood still, his unseeing eyes fixed forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You made the mistake of coming after me first." Axel let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head. "Still talking big, huh? Let's see how tough you are when I take you apart piece by piece." One of Axel's men stepped forward, a crowbar gripped tightly in his hand. "Let me handle him, boss." Axel raised a hand, stopping him cold. "No, he's mine." Eli's body tensed, his senses honed to every sound, every shift in the air. He could feel the weight of the confrontation closing in, the inevitability of violence. There was no easy way out, and he knew it. "You should have stayed out of my way," Axel said, taking a step closer, his voice low and venomous. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing, old man, and I'm about to prove it." The air grew thick, charged with the promise of bloodshed. Axel's men fanned out, circling slowly, their movements deliberate, confident. But then, cutting through the tension like a knife, came the distant wail of police sirens. Axel froze, his head snapping toward the sound. A sharp laugh escaped him, but it was laced with unease. "You hear that, old man? Guess someone thought they could call the cops on me." He turned to his men, his confidence unshaken. "Relax, boys. It's probably Peterson or one of his buddies. They'll clear out once I have a word." Eli remained still, his grip on the cane steady, his head tilted as he listened to the sirens growing louder. Closer. Axel sneered at him. "You really think the cops scare me? Half of them work for me. If this is your big plan, it's pathetic." The sirens swelled, now impossible to ignore, slicing through the tension in the room. Axel signaled to one of his men, "Go see who it is. Tell them we're just having a little chat and make sure they know to stay out of it." The man nodded and headed for the door. Moments later, his voice came back, nervous, uncertain. Boss, you might want to see this." Axel's frown deepened, the first crack in his bravado showing. He stormed toward the door, his heavy steps echoing. "Who is it?" he barked, stepping outside. What he saw wiped the smirk from his face. A line of police cars blocked the street, their red and blue lights flashing in the morning haze. Officers were stepping out, weapons drawn, but none of them were familiar. No Peterson, no friendly faces. Axel's expression twisted with confusion and anger. "Who the hell are these guys?" he muttered under his breath. The lead officer, a tall man with a sharp, unyielding gaze, stepped forward. "Axel Kane, step away from the house and put your hands where we can see them. Now." Axel didn't move, his mind racing. "Who sent you?" he demanded, his voice faltering. The officer's expression didn't waver. "This isn't a negotiation. Hands up. Now." Axel turned back toward the house, his bravado slipping, replaced by something closer to panic. "Something's not right," he muttered, his eyes darting to Eli. "What did you do?" Eli tilted his head, his voice calm but cutting. "Told you, Axel. You've already lost." Axel's men shifted uneasily, the weight of the moment sinking in as more officers surrounded the house. The reality was undeniable. This wasn't one of Axel's allies coming to smooth things over. This was something bigger, something they hadn't prepared for. "Boss, what do we do?" one of his men whispered, his voice trembling. Axel didn't answer, his eyes locked on Eli, his face contorted with rage and desperation. "You think this is over," he growled, his voice low, venomous. The tension in the room was suffocating. Every one of his men frozen as the sounds of officers closing in grew louder. Without warning, Axel lunged at Eli, his fists clenched, his movements fueled by raw fury. "I'll deal with you myself." Eli's body tensed, his grip on the cane tightening. Though Axel's attack was wild, Eli could sense the force behind it, the desperation of a man cornered. As Axel closed the distance, Eli pivoted smoothly, sidestepping the charge. The lunge left Axel overextended, and Eli struck, his cane arcing downward with precision, connecting with a sharp crack against Axel's knee. The big man stumbled, a grunt of pain escaping him, but the fight was far from over. Outside, the officers tightened their perimeter, their shouts growing louder, and Eli knew the clock was ticking for all of them. In the dimly lit chaos of the old house, Eli moved with a precision that belied his blindness. His cane, an extension of his will, sliced through the air, striking Axel's knee with a sharp, deliberate blow. The big man staggered, his momentum betraying him as he lurched off balance. Before Axel could regain his footing, Eli swung again, the cane cracking against the side of Axel's head with a resounding thud. The impact sent Axel crashing to the floor, his massive frame crumpling like a felled tree. He groaned, clutching his temple, but the fight had drained from him. He was done. The room erupted into pandemonium. Axel's men, stunned by their leader's fall, spun toward the sound of heavy boots. Storm-issued commands filled the air as police officers stormed the house, their weapons drawn and voices booming. On the ground, hands behind your heads, some of Axel's crew froze, raising their hands in surrender, while others, fueled by desperation, made a break for it. One bolted toward the back door, only to be tackled by an officer in a blur of motion. Another swung wildly at a cop, but a swift takedown left him sprawled and subdued. Amid the chaos, Eli stood still, his cane resting lightly against the floor. His unseeing eyes gazed forward, calm and resolute, as he listened to the scuffle of boots, the metallic clink of handcuffs, and the growled protests of Axel's men being restrained. Captain Ruiz's voice cut through the din as he stepped into the room, his presence commanding instant attention. "Everyone's in custody," he declared, his eyes sweeping the scene before settling on Eli with a subtle nod of respect. Eli tilted his head toward the sound of Ruiz's voice, his tone steady. "Axel's yours now. You've got everything you need." Ruiz glanced at Axel, who was being hauled to his feet by two officers, his wrists bound tightly in cuffs. Blood trickled from a cut on his temple, and his face twisted with fury. "You're finished, Axel," Ruiz said, his voice calm but unyielding. "This neighborhood isn't yours anymore." Axel snarled, jerking against the officer's grip. "You think this is over," he rasped, his voice hoarse with rage. "I'll be out in no time, and I'll burn this place to the ground." Ruiz didn't flinch. "We'll see about that. We've got the evidence, and now we've got you. Your reign over this block is done." As Axel was dragged out, his men trailing behind in cuffs, the house fell quieter, the storm of violence giving way to an uneasy calm. The echoes of the clash lingered, but the tide had turned. Ruiz turned back to Eli, his expression softening. "You okay?" Eli nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "I'm fine. The neighborhood will be too." Ruiz's eyes gleamed with respect. "You did good, Eli. Real good." Eli tilted his head, listening to the fading wail of police sirens outside. "It wasn't just me," he said quietly. "This neighborhood fought back, and it won." For a moment, the two men stood in silence, the weight of their victory settling over them. The battle was over, but the triumph belonged to the community, not just one man. Later that afternoon, the sun cast long, golden shadows across the diner as Eli stepped inside, his cane tapping softly against the tiled floor. The air buzzed with hushed conversations, the tension palpable but tempered by hope. In a corner booth, Ruiz, Angie Jenkins, and Maya sat huddled over a folder brimming with documents, its pages strewn across the table. Their faces were a mix of relief and steely determination. Maya rose as Eli approached, guiding him gently to a seat. "You made it," she said, her voice warm but threaded with concern. Eli settled into the booth, nodding. "What's the status?" Ruiz tapped the folder, his expression grave but resolute. "Axel and his crew are in custody. The evidence you provided was ironclad recordings, ledgers, everything. It ties him directly to the drug and weapons trade. He's not slipping out of this one." Angie leaned forward, arms crossed, her tone sharp, and the dirty cops. Ruiz's jaw tightened. "That's where it gets complicated. Your evidence exposed a handful of officers who were either feeding Axel intel or looking the other way. We've launched an internal investigation, and the ones we've identified are suspended. I'm pushing for charges, but cleaning house will take time." Eli leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "It's not just about Axel. The neighborhood needs to see this through. If they think nothing's changed, someone else will step into his place." Ruiz nodded, his eyes steady. "Agreed. The precinct's under scrutiny now. They can't afford to lose what little trust they've got left. Jenkins drummed his fingers on the table, his brow furrowed. And Axel's gang, he's out. But his guys won't just vanish. Ruiz's lips pressed into a thin line. Most are behind bars after last night's arrests. The rest are scrambling without Axel's money or leadership. They're fractured, and without their grip on the block. It's a slow bleed out, but you're right, it's not over yet. Angie exhaled, her voice softer now. It's a start, but people are still scared. A few arrests won't undo what Axel broke. Eli turned his head, his unseeing eyes seeming to meet each of theirs in turn. Scars heal, he said, his voice low and steady, but only if people believe it's worth fighting for. That starts with us. The table fell silent, Eli's words sinking in like a stone in still water. Maya finally spoke, her voice firm. You're right. This neighborhood's always been tough. It just needed a reminder of what it's capable of. Ruiz closed the folder and stood, extending a hand to Eli. You gave it that reminder. We couldn't have done this without you. Eli hesitated, then shook Ruiz's hand, his grip steady. It wasn't just me. It was all of us. The group exchanged small smiles, a quiet understanding passing between them. The fight wasn't over, but they'd taken a crucial step toward reclaiming their home. As Ruiz gathered his things and headed for the door, he paused, looking back. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me. Eli nodded, the faintest hint of a smile on his face. Same to you. When the door closed behind Ruiz, the group sat quietly, the reality of their victory settling in. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't final, but it was a win, a hard-fought one. For the first time in years, the block felt a little safer. Jenkins raised his coffee cup, his voice steady. To the block. Eli lifted his own, his tone resolute. To the block. The others joined in, their cups clinking softly together. Outside, the street hummed with life, the first glimmers of a brighter future taking root. As evening fell, Eli stepped out of the diner into the cool air, the sounds of the neighborhood wrapping around him like a familiar song, the distant murmur of conversations, the laughter of kids playing on a nearby stoop, the rhythmic squeak of an old bicycle wheel. They painted a vivid picture in his mind. His cane tapped lightly against the cracked sidewalk as he began his walk home, his body still aching from the confrontation with Axel. The bruises were a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything, but there was a lightness in his step now, a quiet pride. They'd done it. The neighborhood had stood its ground, and Axel's shadow was finally fading. Being blind had always been a challenge, one Eli had learned to meet head-on, but it often felt like a barrier between him and the world. And being black in a place where the odds were stacked against him, that could feel like an unbreakable wall. Yet tonight, those walls seemed smaller. The sidewalk's familiar cracks and dips guided his steps, each one a testament to the block he called home. This wasn't just where he lived, it was part of who he was, part of what he'd fought for. His blindness hadn't stopped him from seeing that, and neither had the prejudice he'd faced his whole life. As he passed the corner store, its window glowing softly, Mr. Jenkins' voice called out from inside, "Stay safe, Eli." The warmth in the older man's tone was unmistakable. "Always," Eli replied, raising a hand in acknowledgement. Each step brought him closer to home, the rhythmic tap of his cane a steady beat to his thoughts. He remembered Axel's sneering voice, the hateful words meant to break him. But those words had no power anymore. Axel was gone. His crew scattered, and the block stood stronger than ever. Eli reached his front door and paused, his hand resting on the frame. The neighborhood's sounds filled his senses, vibrant, alive, unbroken. He tilted his head back, letting the cool air brush his face. He'd never set out to be a hero. He was just a man, a blind black man, who'd chosen to stand when it mattered. And tonight, as the block began to heal, he realized that was enough. He could make a difference, even against the odds. Stepping inside, the familiar creak of the floorboards grounded him. He set his cane against the wall and let out a long, steady breath. For the first time in a long time, the house felt like home.